Oh, stop. You hear that? That's other human beings in the background. And you know why? My brother and Seth are here. They're here to save the day. This is the weekend that we're gonna try and fire this engine up. This is one of two UPS. You guys are amazing. Hey, we have both. We just can't find them both. This is from Bell Intercoolers. Bell, you guys are amazing. UPS, we've had a wonderful relationship, haven't we? This isn't mission critical. This is something that Isaiah's working on while I'm working on the engine. And these guys leave on Monday. The word in yellow says it all. We got titanium. That's just a hint of what's about to happen on this vehicle. 4130, got titanium. We've got aluminum to help make a quick fuel cell because that other one's just not gonna work that you guys saw in another video. 321 stainless 1/4 inch that we're gonna be making some engine mounts and whatnot out of. Adder from Built to Apex. Definitely produced. I got tolerance issues on the bottom and tolerance issues with the belt. So what we're gonna do is put the alternator on and let's see where the belt ends up. That is where the tube chassis is, right there. This will be one of the first times in my life where it could be really tight. It just needs to get, that's putting a lot of pressure on the, Oh my God, today is not the day we're starting it up. It's the day before. Hauling ass, Kev, Seth, and I, and soon to be Isaiah, all firing on all rotors, not cylinders, all rotors. We've had some challenges, as you'd expect, but nothing that's gonna stop us from firing this up. We have some unorthodox ways of getting this to properly protect itself when we go to fire it. So you're gonna see some crazy shit that looks like it's Rob Dahm style, but it's actually protecting the motor more than you think. Let me show you what each of us are working on right now. Seth, right over there. Seth is working on his Key and Peele impressions. Oh, detective. He's working on is tightening up all the manifold. We do have the bolts for the secondary rail blocked in. We're only gonna run one fuel rail. So everything's all 10AN to and from a fuel cell that Isaiah will be here to make. He's just gonna straight up make it. Kev is currently working on our plan, I'd say F. Well, let's go over there and take a look at what he's doing. The plan F is this. That is a 16AN line from Holley. So it's one of the Ultra Pro lines. Here we go. Oh, we'll just go to this one. Good old Harbor Freight. Boom. What Kev's doing is actually for these lines here. You can see this is the fitting, and that's the other end right there. Since Isaiah mounted this close, but not identical to where the RX-7 components are, we're gonna use these 16AN lines for this specific purpose. 16AN line over to the Clearview filter. Then, same concept, we're gonna do another 16AN from here. We're gonna crank the top of this over 90 degrees, and so it'll be a 90 over, 90 in. One 12AN line sucking out of the tank, going down into the pump. Those are the 3 lines that have to be made immediately. The other 3 that are very critical are these 3 right here. Not only is Kev wearing sick gloves, I'm jealous. he stole my gloves. Oh yeah, everybody except me is wearing the sickest gloves. My hands are getting all torn up because of it. I'm currently working on getting this oil pedestal with these O-rings. They sit just gently in there. Getting that put in properly without crushing an O-ring. Yuck. So, I'm gonna continue working on getting all the fittings and the centralized stuff working. This line is gonna go to the splitter. I'm gonna split this to 3, and then here's the 4th line. And again, this is temporary, but it goes something like that. And there's our 4 lines, no turbo at the moment. We are not going to run the secondary fuel rail, even wire it. Isaiah is currently working on the new fuel cell. Oh, wow, that was not like that moments ago. Partially because he's got his brake and skill to make a box. I went and picked up this at G&J. He's gonna get a 4.5 inch hole saw. The height should be fine, yeah, let's test it. So I've got these on slide. They are very much going to clear the bottom. The man needs a whole saw. There's a handful of things we are doing that are solely to start this up on the engine stand, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. One of the things is I have this smaller pulley. The reason that's okay right now is that is going to spin this oil pump faster. The oil pump is supposed to only spin to like 4,600 RPM at peak engine RPM, so it should be like a 2-to-1 ratio. These are way closer to 1-to-1. If we were to rev the engine, we would be overspinning the oil pump. A, I don't know the ramifications. I don't know what happens with that. B, that's gonna allow us to provide more oil pressure at low end, which is what we're doing. We're trying to start it and then call it a day. That allows this belt to work, but that does not allow this to work inside of the engine bay. Quite frankly, that's about $300 in fittings and hoses that I'll have to redo because a lot of other things have to be shaken out right now. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it to move forward on that. This is the hose that Kev made. And that one will go in there and go to there. These are the Earl's fittings, and on both sides, they swivel, both ends, beautifully. And look at that, that's 16 AN. The radius is just amazing. There's some more janky things that I have to do, and one of them is this. Again, they're blue, and it reminds me to resolve this later. I capped off every fitting on there other than one in and one out, and that's because we will not be running this fuel rail. It'll be on and sealed, but this will just go one fuel rail in, 10 AN, 10 AN out. So everything's gonna be all 10 AN. Beautiful. I only have a 2-gauge battery terminal. I wanted double aught because of the sake of the starter. You know, voltage drop and all that's gonna be nuts. This is what we're dealing with right now. I'm gonna take this relay. That'll be the relay for the ECU and fuel. We twisted the top part of the dry sump tank and reset it right there. And then the bottom one's over here. I just looked out big time. McFadden Dale closed a half hour before we could get to it. I had these handful of bolts I'd purchased prior to that, and what you see right there is the end of the bolt is just too long. I had them for spares on the clutch housing. I think we have a flywheel that won't fly off at the last second. It looks like what we're gonna do is crimp this end, and then he can measure the other end. These oil metering pump lines, we would need to block these off. Those are air holes into the rotor housing, into the chamber. Yeah, there's no combustion going on in that phase, but that does affect air to fuel ratio immediately, and shit can go in and come out. These are all too long. It does kind of look like we're either making moonshine or cannabis distillates or whatever. I don't know the wording. Oh, too dark. Take the bell housing off and use it actually on the engine without the transmission. There. Thankfully I'm pinching and holding this. It was so funny when we were in line at G&J and that guy was talking about my videos.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize it.
I saw this on watching videos.
Okay, now we've got the starter mounted on there. We could put the transmission on, but at least just the starter. I can set the battery here and wire the first of major lines from there to here. Isaiah's working on busting the battery down. Tatiana, bust it down. I was trying to get you to laugh. The neat part is everything Kev's doing is really making this more of like a show and tell science project. One of you oil experts are gonna have reasons why that's so bad. Well, guess what? We'll just add more oil. We're gonna crank the oil system by hand, so it'll all be filled with oil anyway. While those guys are doing all that, you'll watch on the time lapse, I added in the PDM properly. I've got this relay for the ECU and injectors, and then this relay for the ignition. Nice and clean setup. Isaiah was pointing out the PDM doesn't require relays. I was saying that the car doesn't require relays, and then I realized the car does require relays. This can't do it all. It can do everything else, the entire rest of the car. That's how I'm gonna go to sleep tonight, is realizing that when I said the car, I meant the body. I've also been working on crimping this cable, so that way we have battery positive going to this spot, and then that will daisy chain to the alternator. The 3-rotor giveth, the 3 rotor taketh away. I found this line that I used on the 3 rotor. I'll clean it up a little bit. It's meant almost exactly for this situation. Even though it's a high performance engine, this is not a high performance environment. This is an idling environment. I'm not worried about using 4 gauge from the alternator. That's really not going to be a problem here. Isaiah's got the fuel tank, well, cell, looking decent. He's got the little booties. Those go on the bottom, little socks to filter it. All the coils all crimped. I'm gonna solder down here just to keep them all tight. Then I'm gonna put heat shrink over it. Just don't want that to cause one coil to go dead randomly. That will then go to this relay. Kev's beginning to do the oil feed lines. It's just fascinating. This is starting to look like, well, Kev's got the right gloves. It looks like a race team thing kind of going on. Seth does not have gloves and does not look like he's part of the race team. Yeah, so Seth's putting on the grounds for each of the coils. It's still the shortest path to the housing, but it'll do. Isaiah machined these to fit in the oil feed lines. Right now, we're gonna get the correct final updated map for an NA4 rotor for the Adaptronic from the laptop. Get that fired up because we need to plug in all of the ignition coils. And I wanna make sure the correct coils correspond to up here to then know with Seth which coil is which wire. Adaptronic's plugged in. I'm gonna go to my Pornhub downloads. No, just kidding, just 4 rotor downloads. We're gonna go to support, wiring guide. I'm gonna guess ignition 1. I don't know if ignition 1 is leading or trailing. I think ignition 1 is leading. It does correspond to a blue wire, which corresponds to a blue wire here. Pin number 9 is this, and you can see there's a little 1 right on the edge of this. So I did do that right. It's checking out on the ECU. Let me take a look at what ignition 1 is. I bought like every lead possible for these wires. You'll just hold this onto the green inside part. Oh, put that one in there. And then I'll take the red one that you've got. That is rotor 1 leading. Not that one. Second. We'll double check it once I crimp it. Take one of these off. Okay, this should be rotor ignition 1. Scoop.
Aw, it's like
Number 2. All right, well, we'll go ahead and speed past you guys on that. Kev's getting all the irons fed. Seth and I just got this 7/8 of the way done, and then Kev starts walking over with like an octopus of AN lines. Isaiah is playing kindergarten with a square, with a cube. He's trying to fit a round thing onto a cube.
I'm fine if you feel so. Are you winning? No.
I'm working on powering the ECU and injectors, really. These both go into the same system, but I wanted to have 2 just in case they needed more power for all of the injectors. And then this will connect to this relay here. We've got the power being supplied to all of the ignition, and then we're gonna start segmenting off these and crimping the ends. We're not gonna trim any of these wires. We're gonna keep them the full length and just simply put crimpers on the ends, make fittings, and call that a day, because I want to use this harness as much as possible. Kev's working on the fuel system. Isaiah's getting his thing ready, so if you hear that noise in the background, that's Isaiah doing that. We're gonna run 1 fuel pump on low. I have one of the controllers for one of the fuel pumps. This will go somewhere close to the fuel cell, and then this goes over to here. PDM's gotta be programmed. It's gonna be really neat, because I'm gonna be able to press a button like this and start the motor. Like, drrrr. With the ignition coil bracket off, you can see just how much oil this engine consumes. I shouldn't say consume, but utilizes. Each of these get oil. All of those, plus the turbo. We chose to make these longer because we can always buy the fittings inside of here and shorten those back up to length. Looks like Isaiah's almost finished up with the fuel cell. How's it going, Isaiah? That's your line. That's your cue, Isaiah. Isaiah, you say, hey, Rob, I just finished the fuel cell. Isaiah, you fucked this whole scene up. How's the fuel cell, Isaiah? Hey, Isaiah, Mr. Duran, how's that fuel cell treating you?
It's done.
Oh, it's done, dude. That is awesome, man.
Line up if you like twist it, if you look at it the right angle.
One of the sexiest things ever.
Right down here.
Okay. This turned out better than I could have expected. That. We've got this fitting all welded off because we have zero use for that. I installed this greased up O-ring. There is an idle air control valve. We're on hour 13 straight. The guys just cleaned out the fuel injectors for me. Just took off all of my wiring. They're gonna weld the fuel pressure regulator onto that arm right there, allowing for ease of access. I'm gonna leave the entire wiring loom intact and then terminate everything to the very back of the engine. It's occurred to us that this is the first billet 4-rotor ever to try and start firing. There's tons of people that have posted on Instagram, and you'd think that those guys would be me. That type of person that's like, oh, I'm just gonna flaunt it and show it. We just realized there's nobody else that has fired a 4-rotor with billet irons. We're putting all the fittings back on, and I actually was concerned about this, and it became a concern again, is that these are really close to each other. We can start mounting these. We're only gonna use one for this phase. It is time to put the wiring harness onto the car for reals. We've got the ignition harness on, and we've tested that a couple times, but that's also semi-permanent. That's the only one that we have to add more grounds to. This is essentially the ECU's ground. Everything comes to the star pattern right in the center. Yeah, the master ground is gonna sit on the very bottom of all those. And then, the battery ground. Easy one, we can take this one away from all the other ones. This one should be all the injectors. It's meant to sit here. They're in pairs of 2s. The 2 shortest ones obviously go to the closest rotor. This is wastegate. That one can kind of roll back. We're not gonna deal with that one yet. This is manifold air temp. Normally on the FD, plugs in the bottom. This one's the one on the top of the manifold. Engine coolant temp, so this one needs to go to that. So these two are the oil over here. And this one is crank angle sensor. This one is very important, central to the whole car. And that one does go over there. Trying to find like the safest away from the belt. It already had a protective casing, and I added another protective casing to it. I am not letting the angle sensor get fucked. Don't like it exactly where it's at. Obviously having a sensitive thing like that around high fire ignition coils is kind of crazy, but that's decent. I think this one's wheel speed sensor. Yeah. So this one will go to the transmission. Actually, it'll probably switch from wheel speed sensor because it's meant to be like a reluctor speed to on, up gear, up gear, up gear. This one is throttle position. Right now, all we're gonna worry about is oil pressure. This is a flex fuel sensor. Fuel pressure. So, we'll figure that out. So fuel pressure is an issue. We are ready for the manifold. If you wanna, Kev just asked if it's ready, time to pull this, and it is. Nah. You guys get to see my magic ports. This is the most important one right here. See how they're larger? They try to make up for these. Rotor 4 primary, secondary, rotor 3 primary. Has to be a secondary. There. It's the first time I've had all of those off, and Isaiah's balls deep into it. Okay.
Everyone get their foreplay in?
And then over there.
I just want to know what.
Yeah, what love feels like.
No. What is that? No. Right.
Manifold.
Sometimes you need.
We can finally put this one in. I've been seeing it just sitting right there, waiting. Oh, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this should be 1 and 2. Yes, please. Maybe 7 and 8. Wanted to get this to kind of loop around. Yeah, like that. Thank you. My hands are doing that 20th hour of playing World of Warcraft cramping up. This one, This one's gonna get power from this one. This is the data line, so it's not gonna cause any interference. Is if you can tighten the oil filter, they leave it. They have it like. One thing people seem to enjoy from my recent videos is that I'll cut the sound, so it's like. People like the sound.
Oh, like the assembly sound?
Yeah, they call it ASMR for cars, I guess. We're gonna be putting on the master ground from the battery to the center of the star position. We also have one more ground for the PDM. It's a really big star. These are honestly the nights that you make memories and you don't realize you're doing it at the time. You know you're doing it because you're working on starting the world's first Billet 4 rotor. Nobody's done it before, but you're so focused on getting the job done you don't realize that you're having a blast in the process. The four of us have been busting ass, and I can't leave the video here, guys. You want to start it? You want to start it? No? Anybody in here want to start it? Oh, they said no. Oh wait, there was a squeak. There was a squeak. We gotta try to start it.